I don't know how to do it, but what's new, Kangaroo? We're here.
I kind of love it.
Hey everybody, I'm Bryce. We're here at CRKT and we are lucky enough to be joined by Kevin from Knife Nerdery. We have a new video we want to do with you guys. We want to go back into CRKT's past. We've been making knives for over 30 years now, and there's a lot of innovative designs that we came out with throughout that history that aren't in our line anymore, and we wanted to connect those too with some of the similar designs that we see in the greater knife market. So appreciate Kevin being here as always.
Yeah, my name is Kevin. I'm an engineer, and I run, like you said, the knife channel YouTube called Knife Nerdery. I try to take a design and engineering focus on stuff, and I'm a big mechanism nerd. I just love clicky mechanical gadgets, and I love innovative, creative ways of doing stuff, and that's why I've always been a huge fan of CRKT. Because CRKT has been making knives for over 30 years, but they've also been bringing really creative, innovative stuff to the market for 30 years. And a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, some of it is purely practical, like good implementations of novel lock mechanisms. Some of it is weird. And honestly, it's just kind of fun, but even the stuff that's really fun is important because it pushes the market forward. It makes people like expand their definition of what a knife can be. And it's that kind of stuff that makes it brings that creativity into the world. And it's only companies like CRKT that's willing to be weird and willing to take a gamble and risk. Like some of the stuff that's so strange is so weird that it's not practical enough that it probably doesn't sell super well. And so I adore the fact that CRKT has a long history of being willing to be that person in the market that's willing to take the risk, that's willing to put something really innovative, neat, and strange on the market. Because it's without that, you don't have the new innovation. If you don't have that constant flow of people going like, not just people, but like the masses going, oh wow, knives can be fundamentally different than I thought. That's what drives the innovation, that drives the market forward. I adore CRKT's place in history for that. And so it's so incredibly cool to get to talk about all this stuff with you today.
Yeah.
We're gonna be going through a bunch of neat things, lock mechanism stuffs that are totally novel, weird, interesting, ways of opening stuff, and some stuff that's completely outside the box from any of that. This is going to be a really, really cool lineup.
Yeah, really fun. We got to dive into our history too. We have a couple cases in the building that are just so much fun to peer into and see the history. And
I've been fortunate enough to look at some of those crazy old prototype stuff. It is so freaking cool.
So much fun to see different time in knives, the designers and their thoughts, and we have some prototypes and stuff too. But yeah, it should be really fun.
Yeah, so right off the bat, I want to get into lock mechanisms. And so people, if they know knives, have heard the name Michael Walker. He is one of the most prolific knife makers when it comes to different mechanisms. He has over like 30-something different lock mechanisms just to his name.
I think it's debated too, correct? Like
I know.
I've seen different examples, and I don't think Michael even knows how many he's invented.
He said that number comes from the fact that one of his collectors says, I personally have over 30 in my collection. She was like, oh, I guess it's at least that many. But back in 1990, he came up with this idea for something he calls blade lock. And about 10 years later, it finally came to the market. And this is, again, CRKT is so cool because it partners with like brilliant designers like this to bring stuff like this that you would only ever get in a custom. Michael Walker's customs cost tens of thousands of dollars. And so the idea that you, an average person, can get something that works, looks, and functions the same way from Michael Walker at a actually affordable price point that's so freaking cool. It's such an, anyway. This is the blade lock. And at first glance, this looks like a thumb stud because for all intents and purposes it is, but this is locked in the closed position too. This is from 2000, so if you think about it, this is before the modern era of like flicking knives open. So the idea of having a detent in here and flicking it, that was never part of the goal. Instead, this works in a very, very different way. I know with like the camera is probably not going to be able to see the close-up well, but there is a little tiny lever bar in here that's acting like a seesaw, and there's a spring right behind this thumb stud. So when you actually push down in on that thumb stud, which is a really weird way of feeling when you're acting a knife, pushing down on the thumb stud. But when you do that, you're teeter-tottering this lever bar like that, and on the other side is a little notch that goes into like two different holes on the backside underneath this plate. Like these plates look cool, but they're actually functional because they're covering up those holes where those slots are. And so you open this by pushing down on that, rotating this out, and then it clicks into place and locks in the front forward position. It's so clever and
Yeah.
so different from how like something like a liner lock or a frame lock or a lock back or any things that we're used to in knives. And especially at the time when this came out, this was really, really outside the box. No one had ever done anything even close to this at the time.
No, yeah, it's kind of natural too. And once you put pressure on it, guess what's going? It's kind of guiding you out there anyway.
And once you get it just a little bit open, you can flick it open. If you want to be the one that flicks the knives like smarter people do.
Yeah.
It's so strange. And what's really, really cool, so you guys did a second version of this, a smaller little kind of Wharncliffe shaped version that was called the Blade Lock 2. And what's really neat, talk about that.
Yeah, so this is the newer version that we're coming out with in 2025. So reintroducing it. We've done a little bit of work here lately with Michael, more on his art side.
Yeah.
Michael is not only prolific when it comes to the mechanisms, his beautiful attention to detail and his background in jewelry making naturally complemented and went into it. And you can see it in some of his customs.
His pieces are art, 100% art. He fully accepts that they are art knives. He
Yeah.
calls them art knives, but you look at it and it's like, that is gorgeous. And how did you do all that detail?
Some of the detail, and it's got southwestern vibes. It's got a little bit of like Art Deco to it, but it's a little bit of everything. But just to be prolific, not only in the aesthetic sense, but also in the mechanical functional, is really cool. So we're really excited to re-release this knife.
That art kind of concept really comes through in the lines you see on these. Like this isn't just a Wharncliffe blade. Look at the specific curves. There is very specific balance and flow to these lines. He is a brilliant artist.
Oh man, it's a really comfortable knife. It's fun to bring something back from this era, and it's just a joy to open. And you can flick it, like you mentioned there, but just following that thumb stud in. I'm not a high-speed knife opener. I understand that that's a trend.
Yeah.
I don't need my knife opener right now, generally. So I like a nice slow thumb stud. I'm still into that category, but
Something
this is
I was
very
surprised to
confidence-inducing.
see just a moment ago when I was looking at this is that this modern version is running on bearings. These versions here are on phosphor bronze washers.
Yeah.
And so, like, this is very, very smooth. But that is so much smoother.
And the feel of it overall too, just like having that, even though it's a functional piece, it's just like a nice radius. It almost seems like that's part of opening it at first. That's kind of a hint.
This looks so much like it's going to be a front flipper.
Yeah.
And I've handed this to people and they're like, "Ugh," but it's locked in the closed position. So if you unlock it, you can then kind of like flick it.
Yeah, then you can get there.
You can do
It
that.
is almost like, once you get it past this, look, it's a front flipper now. He
Right?
almost got that ahead of the time.
Kinda do that. It's really fun seeing things like that like modern day audience is definitely going to recognize that as a front flipper.
Definitely.
But you know, back in 1990, even 2000, but back in 1990, no one was doing front flippers like that.
Nah.
So I love so much that this is coming back. I love even more that this is a modern version where you're not just pulling it out of the archive, but you are updating things and putting things like bearings in it to make it more of what we expect out of a knife from a functionality kind of action perspective,
100%.
but still completely true to that original heritage of how that lock mechanism works.
So cool. I like the lack of back spacer towards the back there.
I
Just
know,
kind of that
just
middle
kinda
space.
floats.
You can just go right through there.
That's so cool.
That one even
And-
has a pin, but this
Yeah,
one they
little
just
pin
decided to
right
leave
there.
the pin off there because it's unnecessary, but really cool open design. Yeah, really excited to see this one come back. Michael, so much fun to have at trade shows. He's just such a humble guy and so unassuming at times, and he's one of the most
know.
influential knife makers of all time. That's
And
best
what's
part
great-
about my job.
What's great is not only is he still alive, thank God, but also he's actually pretty savvy. You can talk to him on Instagram. Like you can chat him and he will talk back. Like I was amazed. The first time he responded to me, I'm like, Michael Walker's talking to me right now? I asked him all sorts of questions and he loved it. He loved nerding out. I'm a big knife nerd, hence knife nerdery. He's a big knife nerd. Oh my God.
Man, I remember the first time I got to meet Ken Onion. It was mind-blowing. I was like, it's just kind of funny to think about that now. And I got to go fishing with him one time. It's crazy. Back when I was
What?
slinging blurs and leaks back in the
my
day.
God.
And now I got to meet the man, the myth, legend. He's so cool. I love all of their designers. Super fun to meet him.
So this is a great segue because the next knife we're going to be talking about is this here. And Michael Walker, okay, so he's old at this point. But if you look even slight kind of generation above him, you have Ron Lake. Ron Lake started off as Michael Walker's mentor, but they quickly became really good friends and then collaborators, and they designed a bunch of stuff together. We'll talk about some of those things later. I'll come back. Remember that name, Lake. But Ron Lake created this thing. This is something he called the, I think, piston actuated lock.
I believe so.
I think that's what that stands for.
I believe so.
But it's called Lake's Pal. It's his buddy. This is a button lock, right? And it is a button lock. And by normal standards, this kind of works the way you would expect a modern button lock to work. There is a piston right there. It's got a little wedge. There is a lock face and everything like that, right? Two things to consider about this. The first is that this is from 2005. And so this is one of the earliest versions of a modern style piston lock, as far as button locks work, that actually has a ramped lock face on the other side that actually is like a secure lockup. Like button locks that have some kind of piston date back to, I think the earliest patent I have is from like 1880. Maybe, and one of the more popular ones is right around the turn of the century, the press button. But for the longest time, all they ever did was blockade the knife. Like it literally just popped up. There wasn't a ramped lock face, and so it wasn't a secure lockup. What's wild about this is that that's all there is. There's no stop pin. There's nothing. There's just that. And so when this opens, it's that same piston and only that piston that is now the lock face and the open position too. And it's rock solid. And that's it. Like, trying to drive home why that's important to people or why that's difficult is kind of hard to do, but almost any other knife you ever think on the market has 3 points of contact. You've got the pivot, you've got the lock interface, and you've got something else that forms your kind of triangle. So making a single piston do both is an enormous feat, not just of design, but of manufacturing. I think the reason why these don't still exist and why people don't do it this way and add in a stop pin is because this is really hard to do. Yeah. You can't move things around. You can't tune anything. This one piece has to work for both. And this is a marvel. It's amazing. And people will probably just take it for granted and go like, oh yeah, it's a button lock. Of course it's a button lock. No, this is Ron Lake's Pale. So clever, so cool, so weird.
Fun. Yeah, I hope somebody in their collection finds out that that little simple button lock they had is actually, oh, wow, didn't know.
Brilliant.
That's so cool.
So this is a great segue to another kind of button lock. Let's bring out the Flavio Acoma's Deadbolt.
Sure. Here's a dead-bolted model. We've done a variety of dead-bolted locks with Flavio. Here's actually a model from him. This is the Attaboy. We came out with this back in around 2020, maybe a little bit earlier. We started using the deadbolt, and one of the cool parts about CRKT, especially specifically Flavio, is that when he creates something new, he still wants to share it with everybody. Yeah. So a lot of designers got to take the deadbolt, and they used their imagination and their thought process to approach this lock, which is strong, simple, and safe. How it works, a couple of pins actually sink themselves into the blade, and to get it to fail, you'd have to shear those pins off.
They're beefy pins. This is like when I was saying at the beginning that some of these innovations are purely practical, this is an incredibly strong practical lock.
And not only that, it's really intuitive. You can hand this knife to somebody who's sort of new with knives, and they see button, that's the actuation right there.
Yeah.
Keeps your finger out of the way the whole time. Again, something that we've chatted about, like as a knife person, you don't even think about it anymore. But keeping your finger out of the way is a real benefit.
Yeah, not having your fingers in the path in any way whatsoever. And this is also a really fun form of button lock where, it is the pivot. It's so clean as a result. You don't have anything else there to kind of push on or mar, and as a result, it's also really far forward, which means a lot of people talk about button locks being something that you can accidentally actuate with your thumb. This is in a position where no one's ever going to have their thumb all the way up like that. No. So like, it's functionally better in that regard too.
Yeah.
And it's so freaking strong. These are incredibly strong locks. There's all these videos of Flavio like smashing them as hard as he can. He's a crazy guy. Yeah. This name Deadbolt is so perfect because it literally looks like a deadbolt from your door, like something you would turn. So it's like evocative in a way. Like it makes you think, oh, it's a strong lock. And then it really is so secure with the way those locks go all the way through. One of them goes all the way through both frames. Yeah. The other one goes through the frame. Did you just pop that out?
Yeah, here's the heart. This is the guts. These are the two pins.
You just did that right now. Oh my God, thank you for doing that. That's so cool.
So you can actually undo a lot of our thumb studs. If you take them out, the thumb stud will come out with the spring. And the knife is still, even the assist is still there. It won't lock up. It's just a little floppy.
But yeah, one of these is short and goes through the front frame and the blade, and the other one goes all the way through to the other frame. So you would have to shear those pins or completely destroy the frames in order to get that to come.
This is kind of a fun secret. You can drop it in there and see now it's locked. Now you've got the whole mechanism. That's what it's almost like. It's extremely simple too. It's really robust, simple, and then on top of all the safety kind of additions to it. But yep, that's the heart and soul right there of Deadbolt. Just those pins.
That's the deadbolt.
Yeah, and I love Flavio's videos of him like jacking it up on like it's got like an engine hoist. Or we've had him actually. We have a video of him here in our warehouse of him spine whacking, different crossbar and button locks to demonstrate the issues. And this one you can spine whack it all day and nothing's going to change. So,
He's a fun guy.
it's really great.
I love these kind of pivot button locks. There's very few knives out there that work like that, and so this is one of the first like modern generations. There's a couple of companies that come out with weird versions of pivot button locks, but there's stuff back in the 70s and 80s, and then there was like a big long gap, and then Flavio came out with this, and it's like, yes, I love it. I love that people bring this back, and in a way that is way more secure and real and strong and usable than anything in the past.
Very functional, really cool. And amazing the different designs. You can put it on smaller Flavio. That's actually a Lucas Burnley design in the Butte. And so pretty cool. That's the fun part about CRKT2, using all the designers, and they get to use their technology. That's what really kind of preaches more like the project that CRKT is, and combining this knowledge and getting these designs out to people who may not have been able to get a limited edition Michael Walker.
That is a great segue into, let's talk about that NERC tie. So, from a lock perspective, this knife is not working differently mechanically than something like your standard back lock, lock back, whatever you want to call it. That's generally what's going on here. There is a notch in the blade, and there is a thing that drops into that notch and makes it so it can't close. What's novel about this is how is that lock bar being created? On every standard lock back, or it works basically the same kind of way as like a slip joint, in the sense that there is a back spring, and it's teeter-tottering in some way, right? And you need to be able to kind of bend it out. And that adds additional pieces, getting the strength of that right, tempering the right kind of steel to make it spring steel. That's complicated. Well, a guy named Glenn Klecker wanted to simplify things, and he invented this, and he called it NERC. And his son's name is Nathan. He stands for the Nathan's Irreducible Complexity Knife, N-I-R-K. I think it should be, whatever, it doesn't matter. And what this means is that the lock bar is one integral piece to the handle itself. There isn't a separate piece. If you look, this is all one piece of steel, and it's flexing, bending that piece of steel that allows you to flex the lock bar. This is called a compliant mechanism in mechanical design, and it means that you can take away a number of parts that you have, things that rub against each other, like piston or just kind of like pivoty type stuff. That's mechanical wear, right? You know, they're slowly wearing against each other. When you have something like this that's just staying within the like bendy spring steel portion of its bending properties, it won't wear out. Like, so these types of designs last longer, reduce parts, like it's all around win-win. And it just looks so cool. Now this one is even cooler because this works, like I said, like a back lock, but it's got a freaking flipper tab.
And it's smooth enough. It's kind of crazy. It can overcome all the pressure of that and lock open easily. You think there might be a little bit of a revert as it gets out there, but not the case. It locks up nicely.
And where else can you find a knife that is effectively a back lock, but it has a hollow lock bar like that that you can then even stick a flipper tab through? Like, that's nuts. I said this was a good segue because this is a mechanism by Glenn Klecker, but this is a design
by Brian Tye.
And that's stylistically, you immediately, if you know Tye's work, this is obviously his work. But here's an even simpler version. And one of the reasons I love this little version, this is the NERC Novo, this is entirely Glenn Klecker, is that this is made out of one singular piece of stamped sheet metal.
It's amazing.
Like this is all one piece, but this is one piece, and that's another piece, and there's these little spacers in between. This is literally all one piece. The concept of irreducible complexity in that name, NERC, means that there's nothing you can take out. If you took anything out, it would no longer function. This is as reduced as it possibly can be. And there's literally just one piece. But because of that clever design, this flexes in this really cool way. It's just so clever.
So clean, really cool.
I love it. It's brilliant.
Yeah, compliance devices are really interesting. You see more in like 3D printing world as people use those in like that, in that space.
Yeah.
But, you know, not a new idea, obviously being used in...
But it's having a heyday right now.
Oh, I think so. I've seen a variety of stuff, especially in the 3D printing space. Personal interest, I guess, but
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people using compliance mechanisms
Because you
more
can
and more.
3D print a hinge that
Yeah.
doesn't need to have multiple parts that fit into each
Yeah.
other. It doesn't have any kind of fasteners, and you
Exactly.
can make them tiny.
Fun.
This stuff is great.
That's cool. I love how it's just a single wrap piece of steel.
Okay, let's transition from lock mechanisms into lock safeties. So what is a lock safety? Basically, the knife has some kind of lock to it, and you would disengage that lock to close it, right? Lock safeties are ways of stopping that disengaging from happening accidentally. It's a secondary backup lock that prevents the main lock from disengaging when you're not expecting it to. And this is one of the things where CRKT is, the system we're about to talk about, there's a lot of people who have attempted some kind of lock safety. This is by far the most effective and best, and that's why it is as prolific as it is and that people actually are aware of this one. So you might have actually encountered a knife. If you have an M16, it probably has one of these on it.
Yes, you do.
We're talking about the LOX system, which is a cute name. But we mentioned earlier, Michael Walker, Ron Lake, LOX, the Lake and Walker Knife Safety, LAWKS. Yeah. So what do we have right here? This is this version.
So this is actually a folding Hisatatsu. It's by James Williams, and this is actually what created and birthed the auto locks. So,
yeah, this is
so
Gen
locks
2.
by itself is actually a device that when the blade is open, you can manipulate it and push it forward, and that will put a small lever underneath the liner lock and
Do you
keep
have a
it from
version of that
closing.
on the table somewhere?
I think this one right here. This
Okay, yeah, I interrupted you. Go repeat
Yeah,
that. How does this work?
So actually, this is a Hammond Cruiser. This is one we've been making for quite a while, Jim Hammond Cruiser. And this one has the regular lock system. And nowadays, this one's still blacked out, but you'll notice like on an M16, if it's got red on the pivot, it's auto locks. If it's black, it's just locks. And so this knife, the knife is deployed, the blade is deployed, and then by manipulating this little lever in the back here, a small piece of metal, and it's going to be lost, but essentially it's coming in between the liner lock and the frame, not allowing the liner lock to move. And back in the day, they used the term virtual fixed blade, which I would not use, but this term was used quite a bit, but this makes it quite a bit more secure. We don't really think about it as much. Liner lock's a really secure way of opening and locking a knife, but especially at the time, this was gloves on in the military use cases, they were concerned with closure.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, like, for average people's cutting and EDC, a liner lock is all the strength you possibly need. And it's not that this makes the lock stronger. This makes it so that
lock
it's
can't
not
actuate.
going to disengage no matter kind of what you're doing to it. So if you're doing stuff that's a little bit heavier, a little bit more like twisting motion, something where you, like that, like if you're doing a twisting motion, your hand is kind of pulling a twisting motion against this lock bar. And some people, and some lock bars, especially if they're really, really loose and light, you might accidentally disengage that. And this makes it physically impossible to disengage that.
And I think this actually is a really good example. And this this folding Hisatatsu is actually was actually the genesis of the auto locks. We were using the locks at the time. James Williams had designed this knife, and he likes to do the demo of stabbing this through 1/4-inch plywood. And
As one does.
of course, because this James Williams style, this is a real Tonto blade to me. This is what a Japanese style is much better at that penetration. But what he was concerned about when doing that maneuver was actuating the liner lock. So auto locks actually auto engages when the blade is deployed, and then to close it, you actually have to actuate it. So keeps the blade from closing when you're doing those kind of maneuvers. In a self-defense blade, that's natural, makes sense.
So there's a little tiny spring that kicks it into place automatically. And one thing I love about this is already innovation. But the fact that CRKT doesn't sit on his laurels and say this is good enough, there is a different need. And they're like, whoa, we can make this even better
Totally.
and solve its particular need. Some people might not want it to automatically kick in, but there are times where that is an incredibly useful thing. You don't have the time or potentially the focus to think about, I want to engage this. If you're in the moment, you want the thing to kick in automatically.
100%. This one's cool too. It's got our older assisted opening mechanism, which is just a spring bar that runs along the back that just applies torsion. Now everyone can kind of use this famous Ken Onion style opening mechanism, but this was like a really funny, simple mechanism that just applies pressure and makes a funny noise.
A video on all of the different ways people have done assisted opening would be incredibly cool to do sometime.
Maybe sometime.
But let's bring back Ron Lake and talk about how do we do a lock safety for a different kind of lock. That was for liner locks. This is for lockbacks. And so this knife works just like any other lockback. You've got, like we said before, the spring bar, there's a little notch there. You have to push down on that. And this is a tiny little one. This is the Lake 111. But Lake came up with this idea, which was called, lockback safety, LBS. And this is a way of adding an additional layer of safety to a lockback. So on a lockback, you have to push down on that, right, to disengage that. Sliding this little bar forward, this is a bar that runs all the way to the back. You're not going to be able to see it on camera, but there's a little tiny piece of metal right there. And if you slide this forward, it's sliding right underneath the tail end of that. Since this works as like a teeter-totter, if you slide this underneath, you can't push down on this anymore. It's so solid. And so now you can't disengage it. But this actually works in the closed position too, because the nature of how these work, this has to spring up in order to open. Like that's bending that upward, that's sinking down in. So if you slide this up and this can't sink down in, this is locked in the closed position too. This is back in, I think 2005 is when he came up with this.
I think so.
So just like Michael Walker, Ron Lake is also a very inventive person, which is why they get along so well. Incredibly cool stuff.
Definitely, really natural compliment there. That's cool. We could put that on a Nathan's knife kit or something. We really like enjoying the Glenn Klecker knife and knife kits. Cool way to show how the back thing. Yeah,
that's so incredibly cool.
Super fun way to show how a lockback works, and I bet you that'd be a good demo for sure to show how this kind of sneaks in there.
Okay, we were just talking about how opening knives work, and I think that's a good transition into talking about opening mechanisms. And this is where we're going to transition slightly into the weirder side of stuff. Like, because a lot of these things have the lock mechanisms and the safeties, that's all practical. It's serving a particular need. You need your knife not close. All of this is now kind of just fun.
Yeah.
But there's still a benefit to that. Like we were saying earlier, by making something that works fundamentally different, you are pushing the industry forward by making people think outside of the box that they were in. It makes them go like, oh wow, knives can be completely different. What else could they be? If it could be that, I never thought it could be that. If it could be that, what else could it be? And so the first one we're gonna talk about, actually, why don't we talk about these guys first?
Cool.
Okay, so these all kind of look the same, but these are two different knife models from two different designers, but they worked together. This is Ed Van Hoy and Tom Hickok, and they created this really weird, clever kind of wishbone handle frame mechanism. And yeah, it's an out the side of the handle knife. How weird and wild. It's so crazy to think about a knife that can open like that.
So different, and they're slightly different. They use, even though they're using the same wishbone design, as you mentioned, the lockup's a little bit different. This one locks up on one side. That one's got the dual-sided
posts
clips
on both
that go inside. And then the newer one also has a lock. But yeah, really cool. And just how to make that wishbone open. From a production standpoint, it's really difficult to make sure we can do this consistently across all the knives. So I'm really happy it's still staying in the line too.
You were talking earlier about like mechanisms from one thing, collaborating with a designer from another kind of thing, and how the CRKT melds these things together. I think this is his own really good version of this because they came up with this general concept together, but then each was able to come to market with their own implementation of how do you do that. Yeah, they both have a wishbone that splays, but the way that these lever bars work is completely different from each other, and they end up looking at a glance similar simply because nothing else looks like this.
Yeah.
But they're so different from each other too in terms of the end knife.
That's so crazy. This one's so cool too. I love seeing the grind lines on there still too. It's, I can see where it is. It's super cool.
This was a second generation of the hole-in-one called the Dactyl. It's a little bit smaller, but it also incorporates its own kind of lock mechanism because this is the spring that cams those two things apart, right? But if you push this in, it's now no longer in a way that it can move. It can't bend down anymore. So now you can't cam it apart. It can't open. It's locked. It's so simple, so clever, so weird, so fun. And this one here, this snap lock, this is the thing that got me into knives in the first place. Because when I saw this, it made, like this 20 years ago, I went, oh wow, like knives can be that. And so this is the knife that made me so excited about knives as a way to explore mechanical design and creativity and all that kind of stuff. And so this is an important knife to me, but it's also an important knife to the industry. This is wild and this is cool. And there actually is a practical benefit. Like the blade is never going to close on your hand. It can't close on your hand because it's not moving in the direction of your hand. It's moving like a completely different axis
100%.
than your hand.
That's so cool. And once you get it down, it's amazingly simple how to use this. I teach people, at trade show, they've never played with one or something, but once you get it down, it's very functional. You can close it, open it, manipulate it really easily.
This one here is like a little bit stiff. It's pretty new, hasn't been broken
Yeah.
in. But if you have one that's been broken in for a long time, you can just kind of like flick it. You can flick it actually pretty hard. It's pretty easy.
Super cool.
Incredibly weird, cool knives. And that's the other crazy thing about this. This is a design from over 20 years ago, but CRKT is the type of company that's willing to, and I love this about them, bring stuff like this back to the market.
Yeah.
And so these are in production right now.
Yeah, snap lock has never left, which is pretty cool. I think that's an admirable quality of the snap lock. The
I
Dactyl,
assumed it went and came back. It
No.
never left?
it's never left.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we've been making it the whole time.
I love that.
The same thing with this one. This is we introduced this one. It went away. We brought back the Dactyl. It went away, and then we brought it back again.
It's a little bit like the Disney Vault.
Yeah, we're gonna re-release it for sure. But it's cool. I love that the risk that we're willing to take, and our design team's willing to take at times to make something that may not be the most quote unquote functional, if you really want it. But that's also boring. You could, if you really wanted to, you could boil it down and have just a couple knives in your life that open traditionally, and that would get the job done, right? But
I love the fact that this stuff's back in the market in part because like the way that I learned about this was because it was something that was out in production right now. If it was just an obscure thing that you had to spend months hunting on eBay, then of course no one would know about it. But the fact that a young kid today can go to a knife shop and see this on the shelf and go like, what? They're gonna have the same kind of mind-blown, eye-opening moment that I had 20 years ago. And like, I'm so glad that this stuff is back.
yes, me too. Really cool.
Let's keep going and talk about also some really weird stuff. Let's talk about the Fulcrum next.
Ooh.
So this is another perfect example of, actually, let's not. Let's stick with Ed Van Hoy for a moment. That was the snap lock. Let's do snap fire. That's a better
Snap
transition.
fire. I think you're snap firing. Yeah.
So that's wild and crazy
Whoa.
looking.
This is one of those ones too that you can hand to somebody and they will struggle for a long time. It seems like there's a natural way to open it,
I know.
and you're close.
So this just like free spins. I've seen people go like, am I doing it?
Yep.
Is it just a matter of time? So this entire thing, the reason why this free spins is so you can put your thumb on that and move both at the same time. That you're not like dragging your thumb over that. But you spin this out and it opens. Oh, this one's really stiff.
Yeah, it is.
It pops up.
There it is.
And now it's locked open.
Yeah,
How you close it is even more mind-boggling. The vast majority of people I've ever handed one of these to just at some point is like, you can close it now.
you
I don't
go.
know. Like this took a very long time. This looks like it's going to be the locks, and it's technically not in terms of how it's implemented inside, but it is doing the same kind of thing in that it's preventing you from unlocking it. Does this one actually work?
Yes.
Oh, it does. It's got a really strong spring.
Little stiff.
Wow.
When it's interesting because the mechanism by itself hasn't always had locks. There's actually models out there that don't have it.
Oh,
but
you're
like,
right, yeah.
But like, what's cool about that is to fit that into it is really difficult. And the patent around this actually shows the Snapfire and shows it in its blown up kit. And it's really cool because you can see the other mechanisms that are going on there.
There's like at the end of the day, they knew that, or he knew that he needed this to. Actually, I should say they. There's a couple names in the patent, including weirdly
Yeah.
enough his wife.
Oh, really?
I love that. Yeah, he knew that he needed to make this move a specific way, but he came up with a bunch of different ways of making that possible. Like the way you disengage this is you push the entire blade down. Like that feels wrong. Knives don't do that.
Why are you going that way? Yeah, totally.
That is pushing it out of the catch, and now you can slide it closed. And so what this is doing, as far as being like locks adjacent, instead of blockading a lock bar, like a leaf spring lock bar, this is blockading your ability to, this swings down the thing that blockades your ability to push this down. So when this is forward, you can't. It's really stiff, it's really solid. Pull it back, and now you can slide that down. And so the different implementations, do you have the patent there?
I do. It looks a little bit like an MC Escher kind of drawing when you do
Right?
it this way because it's there's so much going on here. But this is actually the patent for. I'll put it there. Maybe we can get it from the top.
Oh, these are great pictures.
But these really show kind of the mechanism inside.
Let's see if we can get
Eventually, here you go.
Right.
The full blow up is just so cool.
Some of the versions, the pivot is what moves. Sometimes the blade moves around the pivot.
I love seeing that little spring in there. That's hidden. I can't believe they got all of this in there.
It's so complex. There's so many moving parts. And this is a wild-looking knife with all of that covered up.
I know.
So imagine taking this off and seeing all of that complexity. I've never actually disassembled one of these.
Oh, I don't know that I'd be able to get it back
Probably
together. It'd be
complicated.
crazy. And then like, oh, why don't we put a splash of crazy anodization on there with all the rainbow
Do you
colors?
happen to know the backstory of this weird thing that was going on for a while? The
Doug.
crazy colors?
It's all Doug.
Doug?
Yeah. So gas station knives across the country have Doug Flag to thank for their sort of iridescent, like oil slick style patterns.
Yeah, it's some kind of coating material, right?
It's a process. Yeah, I wish he was here to tell it. I can't. I'm not going to do it justice.
I think it's some kind of titanium
it's like
adjacent.
I forget exactly. I might be
coating.
using the wrong words here. Don't beat me up on that.
know.
But like I think like it's just an interesting process that you see. It's ubiquitous at this point. It's
Yeah.
kind of it's everywhere.
And people will do it on like aluminum stuff now.
Yeah.
This is the OG.
That's what,
wait,
just a splash of color.
The actual OG without the splash of color. I can't believe this is here. This is so freaking
Yes.
cool. This is the original prototype of that.
We dug in Rod Bremer's office. Has got a lot of really cool history. He drops.
at
We
this
still. Every once in a while, people here will bring something out of that and just drop it in front of you, and you're like, "Is this a what?" And I've never actually gotten to see. This is the first time I've gotten to see it.
Unsharpened, just block of steel blade. I love seeing like that because it feels like a Minecraft version of a knife because it's just like
100%.
a block.
Taking off the clip gives you a little bit more like hint of what's going on in there.
Yeah, and not having this entire front thing means, so like a moment ago, I just open it up like that, and you can, but like you can so easily do that in this version that doesn't have the top frame.
Yeah, you can see that be almost like a protection thing. We don't want you sticking your finger in there.
It's so
It shows you. You can totally see that whole thing as it's pivoting down on the spring.
Whoa, you
Yeah,
can. That's not going
get
to
in
show up
there.
on video, but
It
oh
won't.
my gosh.
I wish we could.
I am so lucky getting to hold something like this. This is wild. This is so freaking cool.
Yeah.
What a crazy, weird piece of knife history.
And it's such a cool combination, not only of designers, but the factories we work with, the people here internally,
This is really stiff.
and all their ideas. There's a lot of people who should be accredited with some of the innovations here that we've been able to see. But
Oh, right. Okay, so you can actually see exactly how that's blockading.
yeah,
That's so cool. Thank you for taking stuff like
Yeah,
this
of
out.
course.
That is incredibly cool.
yeah, really fun. This is a huge learning experience for me. I've been reading patents and getting into that stuff, and it's fascinating just to learn so much. Just chatting with you, we get to learn so much about our own history, which is crazy. I love those connections that we can make.
Okay, so this is now a good time to move to a knife that opens in a completely weird, fundamentally different way. Let's bring some of these out. This is the Fulcrum mechanism. There's a couple different versions of this that come out. These two are both, the knife design is by, what's his name, Comer?
Russ Comer.
Russ Comer. And so the shape of the knife is by Russ Comer, but this incredibly weird thing that it's doing, that is by Charles Kane. And, oh my gosh, like what even, like the look of this as it's moving.
Takes a lot of trust too. A lot of people will go, and when they get it past to that first point, and then you're supposed to go and squeeze, like it's going to come back down. No, it's going to come back down on my hand if I do
I
that. Like
know.
there's no way you can close it.
It's so
It's an
crazy
insecure feeling.
that like right here, if pushing this closed opens the knife, but if you are instead right here, now pushing this closed closes the knife. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. It takes trust, but it works. It works so well, and
Yep.
it's so like mind bending when you see the handles splay like that. That is so weird and clever.
And the funny thing that we just realized when I was playing with this is I naturally open and close it by using my index finger on the back of the knife, because the way that the scale comes out, it kind of blocks you getting at that liner lock if you go this way. But I naturally just come at it from the back, and that's a better way to kind of get after that action.
The big difference between the Gen 1 and the Gen 2, aside from just aesthetics and I guess general like materials and stuff like that, is if you look at this, see, that's what we're talking about. But the Gen 2 has a scalloped part right there, which catches your thumb. And since you're trying to push like that, this was a really smart, subtle change to give you that better kind of traction as you're pushing over on that.
Definitely.
Subtle, important, but you were just talking about the ways to disengage it. One of the really fun things that I was able to bring here today, this is one of the handmade custom prototypes that Charles Kane made, and this shows his other implementation other than having a liner lock. Liner lock is in the patent too, it's the second version, but this is a button lock version. And it's not going to show up on camera, but there's a tiny little piston right there, and this little bump here is made out of Damascus for no reason. It's covered up by mammoth
Splash.
ivory.
Just a splash of Damascus covered in ivory.
Just to see the little lines just from the side.
Yeah.
You push that in as a button, and then
Wow.
it's so crazy. And this thing, this is like so clearly handmade in this like slightly janky kind of way, and it's great.
A little bit of play really helps. And man, all the file work and the way it was fully deployed and it connects with the backspacer, so cool. It just goes the whole full length of the knife.
Yeah, this is a wild piece of art. And that's one of the things I love. Okay, so Charles Kane, he makes really, really weird, clever mechanisms, but his actual knives, this is probably the most tame thing he's ever made. If you actually look at his art pieces, he makes these crazy things that would look steampunk if they weren't more, they look kind of like biological at the same time. It like looks almost like an octopus knife. He makes the wildest stuff. I would love to peer inside that guy's brain because he's a genius, but also like a mad genius. I love it. I love him to death. He's so cool. It took me ages. I saw this posted. I saw like a proof that this once sold a long, long time ago. This literal exact knife. And I went, oh my God, if I ever get the chance to buy that, I will immediately. And then this popped up somewhere. I was like, well, this is my chance to stick to my word. And like, yep, a lot of money. But, oh my God, what an incredible piece of history.
Oh, yeah, that is so cool. Living, functional. It's an art. It really, yeah, knives really breach this. What is art? And once it becomes functional, it's kind of like, is it? I still think it is. I think that's what's beautiful about knives. It doesn't matter.
Art.
It's still functional.
It's
but
both. It's both
you
at
could
the
cut
same
with
time.
you could cut with the tens of $1,000 Michael Walker. That would open a package just as well.
And you should.
Yeah.
If you own one of those, please say you use it.
Please be using it, man. If you're using it, I want your lifestyle.
Oh my God. Okay, we actually have another knife on the table that this guy came up with, that Charles King came up with. It's this reddish looking one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, this is.
This one's still got the original tag on
This
it.
is literally.
This is our categorization here.
The prototype from November of 07. So this is a really fun thing. This is what they called the glide lock. And this slides forward. You see how there's a little kind of catch right there? There's a little notch right there. Once you're out of that, you can then slide this up around and then glide back down. It's so simple. It's so easy. And so it's so funny to me. This guy is able to come up with stuff that's like really bizarre and also stuff that's like just pretty kind of simple and elegant.
That's great. It's really smooth. And I love that it's just harkens to a different time in knives with kind of the stylistic choices and that sort of marbly look to it.
Oh, I know. Yeah, look at that, whatever kind of plastic that even is.
Yeah, I should look into it because we used it a lot back in the day. It was really interesting. It was
I know.
constantly.
It reminds me, so I grew up with, my dad collects antique radios, and so my house is full of like Bakelite. And
Yes.
Bakelite
We were talking about
looks
that.
like bowling balls. That's what this looks like.
Totally.
And so even though this stuff chips and cracks a little bit too easily, there's reasons to not use it, and I understand why they moved away from it. And also just aesthetically, it was a time in
Different time.
design. But it's also really cool and has a very specific aura to it. It looks neat.
I like it to harken to different times. And again, that's actually a hard one to find not cracked. Those
Oh, I
scales
know.
cracked so easy.
That's why I don't own one of these yet, and why we're using this like extremely one-of-a-kind prototype is because I haven't been able to find one that isn't cracked yet. And this is, as a prototype, is so incredibly smooth. This
Super
is
smooth.
incredible.
Yeah, we still work with great factories. We've always had good factories we're working with.
Oh my
Beautiful
gosh, yeah.
stuff.
This is another case where the design is by Charles Kane, but the knife design, in terms of the shape of it, is by, I forget Gallagher's first name.
Yeah, you defeated me. Sorry, I should have done more research on this
Oh,
one.
it's on the tip of my tongue. Doesn't matter. Anyway, this is one of those things where like CRKT has the unique ability to say, you have an idea, you have an idea,
Yeah.
we can merge this together and
Yeah.
put that into something that's better than the sum of its parts. Because if this was just a normal knife, it would look cool.
Yeah.
But now it works cool, it moves cool too, and that's so much cooler.
It's just a joy. It's just so happy every time you have to open it up, and you can do it so easily one-handed, even with just a thumb. You can do it without having to.
Yeah.
It's a really easy mechanism.
Yeah, this is, I really do hope I can find one of these soon. That's so incredibly cool. And there was another generation that doesn't have this kind of swoopy stuff. Just like with
Yes.
this, there's like a totally different style of knife from a different designer that still uses the same mechanism.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool to find. What do we have next?
What's next?
I don't know if we can use this, but we'll try. It's like in pieces, but let's play with it. We talked about Ed Van Hoy earlier.
Oh,
Yeah, right
this
there.
one.
This is a knife that was called the Yago, and it uses what's called the Arcuate. Arcuate, not accurate, Arcuate, which means like curved, like bowed. Arcuate opening system, AOS. This is, it's going to be kind of hard to manipulate because this one
missing a
example that
pivot
you're able
screw.
to pull out is missing the pivot screw, so this entire thing comes off. But this is a really, how do I put this back on? This is a really weird, interesting way of doing an assisted knife because the blade is locked in a closed position. And if you push here, it's not doing anything. There is a specific spot where this is that if you push right here, now this entire thing is shifting again. Similar to how like the blade shifts on its pivot. Like no normal knives don't do stuff like that. When you do that, now it's unlocked, and if you do it right, can I do it right? Oh, I can't get it. Can you get it to work?
I actually had it sort of.
I've never handled one of these before today, and so.
Oh, neat.
Yeah,
There it
okay.
goes. So
If you do it right, it flings open. It's
it does.
assisted.
And this one actually, you can let it flip open, or you can kind of guide
You
it.
can
That's
catch
the
it.
interesting part. But yeah, unfortunately, because this one's
Yeah,
there,
okay.
it was. Yeah, that was actually a decent demo.
Trying to
without a
hold it in your
pivot.
hand without this handle scale, that's the big part, is like, yeah. I've seen these manipulated, and it's quite easy, but.
Like a dull demo edge on there.
I love the demo knives.
old
The
Cricut,
demonstration knives are great.
old Cricut logo on there. Oh man, I love seeing pictures, and we have such good videos. We have a great video from like a 2010 Blade show. We have some old SHOT Show videos just to see how different it was back then.
There is a video of Ed Van Hoy just casually going, and he makes it look so easy.
Yeah, we have a video really early from like 14 years ago, and the salesperson was really able to manipulate it and show you in both mechanisms. Fun stuff. Again, if you can go to crkt.com or CRKT official on YouTube, look at the videos and sort by oldest, because there's a lot of really great. There's a lot of the guys there that are no longer with us. A lot of the knife designers we work with. Some of my favorite videos from A.G. Russell. I wasn't able to meet A.G. Russell, but I'm fortunate enough to get to talk to Goldie Russell once in a while.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it's such a great touch. Any chance I can go out there to Northwest Arkansas.
This is so neat. It's got like the leaf spring, the way that some autos and the way that other assisted knives work. But the fact that to do it, the entire blade has to shift down on his axis, that's just, this guy's mind works so differently. I love it. I love it to death.
I know.
Okay, let's transition to something that's a little bit more practical.
Cool.
And talk about the field strip technology.
Yes.
So we've got two different generations of field strip here. And the idea of field strip is, on normal knives, there's screws that hold it together. Or if you go back far enough, they're pinned together and they can't come apart. And so on old knives, if you have like a buck 110 and it gets all gunked up because you're actually using it, cleaning that out is tricky. Like trying to flush stuff out, getting like a little Q-tip in there,
Yeah.
it's hard to do.
Yeah.
Modern day knives, they are made with screwed assembly, so you can take the entire knife apart, and that can be a little bit daunting for some people. Like people might not have the right size screwdrivers, they might be worried about stripping the screws, or if you're out in the field, stripping down a knife is actually really hard. Who has screwdrivers on them, and where are you going to put those little tiny screws and not lose them? And so this is a brilliant idea that Ken Onion had. And the first version was Ken Onion and a guy named Frank Huang. So Ken Onion's idea, Frank Huang helped him like productize it into something. And Gen 2 is entirely Frank. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this is so clever. All you do is spin this little wheel at the back. This is a screw. Let me see what direction I have to turn this. I always forget.
I think that way. I think
This
you go
way?
forward. Yeah, there you go. I think it should break that.
This is the particular one. It's kind of stiff.
You can. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have literally.
Holy crap. There we go.
Did you get it?
So this is a secret for disassembling quickly. We had a cup stacking rig back in the day. So the whole thing at Blade Show one year was to see who can get it disassembled it back together. And so like the best technique to get this roller was on the page like this.
Oh, that's good.
So it
You have the
undoes it and
zipper
then you pop it. Just
Right.
those two mechanisms.
So you're turning this. This is literally the screw at the back. So it's not that this knife doesn't have a screw. It's that the screw is done geared in a way that you can turn with your own fingers. And then at the front, there's this really neat little catch right here. It's hard to see on. You're not going to be able to see it on camera, but it's
Yeah.
actually turning this little thing.
And it's going to bite on
around
that
a pivot.
pivot. You can see
Yeah.
that little notch there.
And so the fact that this comes apart, and now these, where is the blade? Right there. Okay, so the fact that there's no like balls to lose, these little washers are secured in here. There's nothing that can come out. Like this is the kind of thing that you can take this apart in the field without any tools, without anything to set aside. You can flush this out in a river or wherever you are and put it back together just as easily. But it can get even easier, because so that was that. This is Gen 2. You literally just push that over.
Yep.
That's it. The entire knife is apart now.
That's amazing.
That's mind-boggling.
All contained within the scale too. There's a bunch of mechanisms that are moving around in there.
It's
to
really,
secure
really
it.
clever. It's just like on that other one, there's these little tiny catches on these posts. And when you slide this, there's a sheet inside here that's being shifting. And if you push this down, you see how this is moving backward? That's sliding that plate inside and catching onto those posts. Like this is so clever, and there's so much complexity, but it's all hidden away in the side where like the end user doesn't have to care about any of that. All they have to care about is that.
Just one movement.
Takes the entire thing out.
Other improvements too, you got pressed bearings in there.
Yeah, so these bearings cannot come out. So
No.
even though it has bearings, they're not going to fall out anywhere. There's nothing to lose. This is so not just clever, but like genuinely useful. And no one does anything like this. There are people who make tool-free disassembly knives, but they tend to fall into the category of like puzzle box knives. So this is a CKF Snex Terra. If we want to talk about like mechanical wizards, Snex Tan from Malaysia is one of those guys. And he originally created I think it's called the IDF-20. It's a tool-free puzzle box disassemble knife. There's no tools required, but it comes apart as all these little pieces. This is not the exact same assembly, but it's similar, and this was a production run that was done by CKF. I forget exactly when. These are incredibly hard to track down. I'm very pleased to have one of these in my collection. From like a knife perspective, it's just a knife. It's a liner lock. It is actually doing one thing weird. The detent ball that's right there, that's not the detent ball.
Oh, really?
That's just to prevent this from dragging on the blade.
Riding on it, okay.
The detent ball is on a separate liner over there. There's two different leaf
Oh,
springs
yeah.
for some reason. But what's different about this isn't how it locks, isn't how it opens, it's how you disassemble it. Because this, if you look, there's this back spring, there's a post, there's a thing right here. If you push down on this, you can technically bend it down just slightly.
Okay.
And if you bend it down, you can then pop this out. This can then now lift up, that can fall out. And what's crazy now, if you look at this, this has a very specific shape to it. So does that.
Hey.
This is your pivot. So it's not that this is tool-free per se, it's that it is its own tool. You can then pop this in here and act that as your pivot tool. Now we're not going to keep
brilliant.
going because under here, look at all these pieces that are falling all over the place. And inside this is literally loose bearing balls. This is 100% not meant to be field stripped. And so it's interesting that there are people out there from like a creativity perspective trying to come up with tool-free disassembly.
That's really smart.
But the practical application of it, this is for fun for people that like puzzles.
Yeah.
This is for people that actually use their knives. And so the idea that you can take the same kind of motivation and end up in some incredibly different places. One is like practically art knife, and the other one is really creative, innovative functionality. I love it, I love it, I love it.
Yeah. Oh, man, that is a really good comparison between the two.
There's so many little pieces inside this.
Yeah. We used to have uncaged bearings too. That used to be a problem, you know.
Yeah.
And man, back in the day, it was even hard to find Torx bits, you know. Like now it's so much easier, but I remember having to like hunt around and finally find them at an automotive section at Sears to find the right small Torx bits that you could use.
Yeah, getting the tiny ones, especially anything like knives back then were all using like T6 and sometimes even lower.
itty bitties. So it was like really difficult. Now it's like a plethora of options to choose, which is great. But yeah, I remember having to really kind of hunt for those for a little bit.
I love that these knives are back together. We didn't use any screwdrivers.
Yeah, I know. We got so good at this one, just racing everybody. We had, I forget what the record was, but it was like 7 or 8 seconds of apart and back together.
7 or 8 seconds?
It was great. It was one of our former parts guys.
That one's like a half a second you hit that.
This one will be a little bit quicker. That's why this one's actually a little bit more fun, because then you have to employ your techniques of the roller method, or the pants roll method was real big. That was revolutionary in the race.
Okay. I wanted to end this video on something that is technically innovation, but it's also just kind of funny. Well, let's figure out where is the edgy.
The
Oh, it's
edgy.
right here.
Edgy.
Okay. This is by a guy named Harold Pope. This was in 2001. This is a knife and knife sharpener all in one. So this is, as a knife, it just looks like a knife.
Yeah.
But inside, deep down in here, there's a little tiny sharpening stone. It's on one side. And when you close this, the act of closing this, it rubs up against, ooh, you can feel it.
You can feel it a little bit.
You can push it down, and you can push it against that. This is the thing that a lot of people don't realize. It does slightly touch, but it's not doing that sharpening motion every single time.
No.
The entire thing pushes past that and bends the spring up just a little bit, and that's how you sharpen it. It's, first of all, that is its own weird thing, being able to push the knife even further, but you can feel it gritting. And this got a little bit of a bad reputation just because this style of sharpening is clearly so much worse than like an actual diamond stone or something like
Definitely.
that. But people kind of misunderstood the point of this knife. because people think of this as like, oh, this is the only way you sharpen your knife, and it doesn't do a fantastic job of sharpening compared to what real sharpening is. No, this is for if you're out in the field, you've been using your knife all day and it is dull as a result, and you have a lot of cutting you need left to do, and you can get a sharp edge back on it when you have no options. Like these days, there's all sorts of kind of travel sharpening things, but a lot of times you just don't have room for it, or you don't have, or you don't have the physical space to be able to do sharpening wherever the heck you are in a ditch somewhere. So the fact that you can put a working edge back on your knife, you probably want to do a proper sharpening later.
Of course.
So the fact you get a working edge on your knife, entirely self-contained, like this got a bad rap, but it's kind of brilliant.
It's fun. Yeah.
It's kind of brilliant.
I get it. Yeah, that's a really fun idea. It's innovative for sure, and for people who use knives, there's different use cases for people who collect an EDC versus functional work pieces, but really fun idea, and it does look like that time and period of knives. And
oh my gosh.
I love it so much. It's really
you
cool.
You can tell this is 20-something years old.
100%. That's just simpler times in knives, and I don't know, really fun.
There is technically a Gen 2 of this, the Edgy 2, and the difference, aside from the fact that it uses like a Lake-style tail lock, is that it has 2 sharpeners.
Oh, wow.
So it sharpens on both sides.
Well, that's why like the blade shape, the blade grind is necessitated by the fact that it's got that sharpening.
Yeah, you can
kind of
see
extra
this
bevel.
like dual bevel thing, and that this is 0 ground, because otherwise this wouldn't work. And yeah, so in the second one, they can sharpen both sides.
That's awesome. Yeah, really funky. I was glad we were able to find that one too.
I know. I've been
digging deep to find
These
it.
actually aren't that hard to find on eBay,
Really?
but the tough part is finding one that's in good condition where someone hasn't edgied the edge the entire way down.
edged it down
Because it's
too
not
quick.
hard to find these that are all, well, you can tell that they were loved. They were used.
I get excited when somebody brings out a buck and it's sharpened to like, it looks like a boning knife.
Yeah,
They've had it
it's
forever.
a toothpick.
Yeah. I love seeing used knives though. That's my favorite thing. Yeah, really cool. This was really fun. Kevin, if you guys liked any part of this, and you want to see a deeper dive, please check out Knife Nerdery. Really fun channel.
Yeah.
YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah, my videos tend to be long, but I always have like places you can jump around, and it's for people that want to deep dive into this stuff. If you want to see like a disassembling some of this stuff, or like how does it actually work inside, even sometimes, physics warning, discussions of physics. Yeah, I get super nerdy, but there is a small audience that seems to love it too. I make the kind of videos that I would want to see, and there are definitely big nerds out there that love it too.
I love the history. I love CRKT history and the knife history in general. And it's just expansive. And every time I think I've got the knife world locked down, we run into somebody like Kevin, and I'm like, I've got still room to grow. So really appreciate you coming out here.
Yeah.
And thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you so much for letting me play with some of these crazy old things you were able to dig out of the archives. Those prototypes, that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Real learning experience.